and of course to our colleagues here at the United Nations, diplomats, human rights officers, and independent experts from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I truly thank you for your steadfast attention to the troubling developments in the United States, and especially right here in my beloved city, the city of Chicago. Many of you have already raised concerns about the deployment of the National Guard in U.S. cities, the militarization of law enforcement, the abusive immigration crackdowns, and other serious setbacks in the protection of fundamental rights. And on behalf of the city of Chicago, I want to acknowledge your statements and expressions of concern. Your vigilance matters because it signals to our communities that the world is watching and that international standards of dignity and justice apply to all nations, including my own. We are here because the federal government under the Trump administration has failed to meet even the most basic expectations of transparency and accountability before this council. And by refusing to submit its Universal Periodic Review Report and declining to appear for its review, this administration seeks to evade scrutiny for its violations of human rights, just as it has sought to evade accountability for its actions in cities like mine. This refusal to engage in good faith with international mechanisms for accountability and oversight is a moral failure. In Chicago, we live with the consequences of that moral failure every day. Families torn apart by immigration raids, raids that have targeted daycare teachers, rideshare drivers, and restaurant cooks. Honest, hardworking, law-abiding people who contribute to the soul of Chicago, who literally make our city run. The federal government's immigration enforcement has been marked by violence and an assault on the dignity of all Chicagoans. Federal agents drag parents out of their vehicles in the pickup line for elementary schools. They throw neighbors supporting their neighbors to the ground and assault them. Right before Halloween, federal agents deployed tear gas on a children's neighborhood parade. This harm is not just concentrated on our immigrant communities, however. In Chicago's South Shore neighborhood, a proud, predominantly Black community, federal agents carried out what can only be described as a military-style raid designed for social media to be a spectacle for the world to witness. Helicopters circled overhead, doors were kicked in, homes were destroyed. Immigrant residents were detained in one van while Black families, including children, were held in another. On the west side, federal agents placed a Black Chicagoan in a chokehold and forced him to the ground, just steps from the doors of the West Side Center for Justice, a space meant to protect and uplift our people. Earlier this week, federal agents crashed into the vehicle of Diane Figueroa, a U.S. citizen who was on her way to get coffee before heading to work. The agents then took her into custody for no apparent reason. These are not isolated incidents. They are reminders that the fate of our communities, Black, brown, immigrant, is bound together. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And in Chicago, we stand united to defend our shared dignity, our safety, and our freedom. The harms that are emanating from the federal government are not only rooted in immigration enforcement. Black and brown communities contend with deepening cycles of poverty while federal programs that once sustained them are gutted. 1 in 5 households in the city of Chicago receives federal assistance to address food insecurity. As a result of the federal government's budget cuts and shutdown, these families will be left without this vital assistance. As someone with firsthand experience, I can tell you how humiliating it is when you open the refrigerator and you have nothing to eat. In the wealthiest country in the world, there is no reason why our federal government should allow hundreds of thousands of Chicagoans to go hungry. And because our administration has invested in addressing the root causes of harm and violence, Chicago has achieved historic reductions in crime and violence. The Trump administration's budget cuts now threaten that progress, not just here in Chicago, but in cities across the country by stripping resources from underserved communities. We have been absolutely clear. If the president truly cared about reducing violence in Chicago, he would restore the $800 million his administration cut from violence reduction efforts and reverse the devastating cuts to life-sustaining public benefits. These are not just abstract policy issues. They are the lived reality of our neighbors, and they are human rights violations. But I also come before you to share the work that is happening in resistance to these injustices. Because here in Chicago, we are taking concrete steps through executive orders, local policy reforms, and community organizing to ensure that our city protects all of our people. We have reaffirmed Chicago as a welcoming city that was birthed by the first Black mayor in the history of the city of Chicago, Mayor Harold Washington. And we have directed departments to refuse cooperation with civil immigration enforcement. We are developing community-based alternatives to policing, expanding access to mental health care, investing in treatment rather than trauma, and working alongside state partners to guarantee that no one loses access to basic needs like utilities or housing because of the federal indifference. In Chicago, we believe that every resident, regardless of their immigration status, they deserve safety, dignity, and protection under the law. Our rapid response immigration teams are a key part to how we are making that belief a reality. And these teams are led by trusted community organizations who mobilize when there are reports of immigration enforcement activity. They work around the clock to verify information, prevent the spread of misinformation, and ensure that families know their rights. Rapid response teams also serve as a bridge between the city and community networks, ensuring that alerts, that know your rights materials and hotline information, that it reaches the residents as quickly and accurately as possible. They connect directly with faith leaders, mutual aid groups, and neighborhood advocates so that no one is left isolated or uninformed in a moment of fear. This is what it means for Chicago to live its values as a sanctuary city, not just in words, but through coordinated action that protects our neighbors, strengthens community trust, and reaffirms that every person belongs here. A city that was established by a Black Haitian immigrant and a Potawatomi woman who established a trade post at the bank of the river, believing that Chicago one day will be the global capital of the world, where immigrants from around the world and descendants of slaves could find refuge in this beloved city. And across our city, community violence interruption programs are providing everyday safety. And we continue to grow these relationships in the spirit of those who established this city. And these are credible messengers, people who know our neighborhoods, who have lived through the same struggles, working to prevent conflict before it starts. They mediate disputes and connect individuals to services and offer pathways out of harm's way. Together, these efforts form the foundation of a new kind of safety infrastructure, one built on dignity, accountability, and love for our city and its people. We cannot do this work alone, though. And that is why I call on this council to hold the federal government of the United States to the same standards of accountability you apply elsewhere in the world. No country should be above international law. Human rights are universal, or they are meaningless. Chicago has long been a part of this struggle. From the 1950s, when the Civil Rights Congress brought the We Charge Genocide petition to this very body, to the young organizers who marched here decades later, demanding an end to police violence, to the courageous lawyers and survivors of the Chicago Police Department's torture scandal, who compelled the UN Committee Against Torture to call for justice and reparations. Our city's residents have long insisted that global human rights norms must be realized locally. We stand in that proud tradition today. And as I close, I invite the UN's independent experts to visit Chicago to witness both our challenges and our progress firsthand. And I urge the Human Rights Council to consider additional measures of accountability, including a special session to examine the worsening human rights crisis in the United States. The people of Chicago and of this nation deserve a government that honors their dignity, not one that diminishes it. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your continued solidarity in the global fight for human rights. My Chief Strategy Officer, Sheila Betty, is here to take any of your questions or respond to any of the follow-up requests. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Johnson, for joining us from Chicago from a very busy time. We appreciate your time and contribution, and we hope that you will be succeeding in what you're doing in protecting everyone's rights in Chicago. Thank you very much for that. We have just, we're wrapping up. We have just a couple of minutes. I wanted to see if there's any member states that wish to take the floor and to address any of the panelists before we close, because I know that we ran a little bit out of time, but I still wanted to provide that opportunity if there's any of the member states would like to take the floor. If not, we would see if there's anyone on the panel would like to say any final words. I know that everyone is going to the council assembly, to the council session, not session, but the UPR session in order to see whether the United States is actually showing up at 2:30 or not. Well, there are no surprises here. I don't think that there will be anyone showing up. We are here showing up, and we are standing for human rights. We appreciate your support. I want to thank every single one of the officials who joined us today and want to thank you for being here, and we will continue this conversation and struggle for human rights in the United States. I appreciate you all. Thank you.